In Hollywood, where friendships are often transactional and alliances shift with box office numbers, some connections defy the industry's cynical logic. Nicole Kidman and Russell Crowe share one of those rare bonds, forged not in the glare of global fame, but in the scrappy, ambitious world of the Australian entertainment scene during the late 1980s. Two young artists, driven by the same hunger to be seen and heard on the world stage, formed a friendship built on shared heritage and mutual understanding. That foundation, laid quietly and without fanfare, would prove stronger than anything Hollywood could throw at it. Crowe was never a peripheral figure in Kidman's life. He was present during her marriage to Tom Cruise, steady through its painful collapse, and watchful as she tentatively stepped back into the emotional arena years later. When friends describe him in relation to Kidman, words like constant and protector come up repeatedly. He occupied a rare position, someone who knew the real story, not the curated version designed for magazine covers. It was from this position of genuine intimacy that Crowe watched a new chapter begin for his longtime friend. At a star-studded Los Angeles gala in January 2005, he witnessed the moment Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban first encountered each other. By several accounts, Crowe saw the spark ignite, and also saw the hesitation that followed. He reportedly played a quiet, encouraging role in the early days of their connection, offering reassurance and gentle opportunities for the pair to grow closer. He was, in the truest sense, there from the very beginning. A love story tested by fire. What followed was a romance that captured the world's imagination. After 4 months of silence following that initial meeting, Urban finally reached out, and the relationship accelerated with the kind of passionate momentum that feels almost cinematic in retrospect. A motorcycle ride through Woodstock, a secluded picnic, and by Nicole's own admission, she was completely captivated. By June 2006, barely 18 months after they had first crossed paths, the two were married. But the fairy tale hit its first devastating wall almost immediately. Just 4 months after the wedding, Urban checked himself into rehabilitation for addiction issues he had long struggled to overcome. He later spoke candidly about having caused the near destruction of his brand new marriage. What followed, however, revealed something remarkable about the woman he had married. Nicole Kidman did not retreat. She did not issue careful statements through publicists or disappear from his life. She dismantled her schedule entirely, cancelling professional commitments, stepping away from promotional obligations to stand beside him during his recovery. Her support, however, was not naive. She understood clearly that she could not do the work for him. She could love him fiercely and hold the space, but the battle was his to fight. He did fight it, and he won. Their marriage not only survived the crisis, it appeared to be deepened by it. Urban would speak in later years about how Kidman had given him the anchor he needed to finally break free from his past. Crowe, observing from close proximity, recognized that this was no ordinary Hollywood partnership. It had been forged in genuine fragility and tested by something real. When distance becomes a slow poison. The years that followed brought a different, quieter kind of erosion. Urban's touring schedule demanded roughly 200 days on the road every year. More than half his life spent away from home, away from his family, and away from the partnership he had nearly destroyed and then fought so hard to rebuild. Night after night in a different city creates a particular kind of loneliness, one that doesn't announce itself dramatically but accumulates quietly, creating voids that are difficult to fill with phone calls and late-night messages. Those close to the couple confirmed that the sustained separation was taking a toll. Sources described Kidman as someone who invested deeply in trying to sustain the connection across the distance, and described Urban as someone who had begun, gradually, to pull away. The emotional warmth that had once defined their dynamic was being replaced by something cooler, more distant, more mechanical. The physical separation was giving birth to an emotional one, and no amount of effort on her part seemed capable of bridging it. The signs that something had shifted. It was within this growing emotional distance that certain behavioral changes began to surface, changes that, in retrospect, formed a recognizable pattern. Urban reportedly became increasingly guarded with his phone, keeping it face down, carrying it everywhere, and reacting defensively when questioned. For a couple nearly 2 decades into a marriage, that kind of sudden digital privacy was difficult to interpret as anything but significant. His conversational availability also deteriorated. Questions about his days on tour were met with brief, vague answers. Even when he was physically present, his attention seemed to be elsewhere. There was a sense, reported by those who observed them during this period, that he was performing the motions of presence without actually being there. Interestingly, the same period saw an increase in his public declarations of affection. At a high-profile ceremony, he delivered an emotional tribute to Kidman, describing the early crisis in their marriage and framing her as the person who had chosen love when he had given her every reason not to. It was genuinely moving to the public. But to someone watching from the inside, someone like Crowe, it read differently. There is a well-documented psychological pattern in which extravagant public devotion functions as a cover for private betrayal. The louder the performance, the more it can obscure what isn't being said offstage. Kidman, for her part, was not oblivious. Intelligent and perceptive by nature, she began quietly gathering information. She monitored social media connected to his touring world. She made unannounced appearances at concerts, gestures that looked supportive in public but were, in reality, something closer to fact-finding. Directors who worked with her during this period noticed moments of emotional fragility that surfaced unexpectedly, particularly during scenes exploring themes of betrayal. The line between performance and lived experience had begun to blur. Backstage at one of Urban's shows, Crowe witnessed her in tears, not for cameras, not for an audience, but genuinely unguarded and hurting. The breaking point. The confirmation of her fears reportedly came not through confrontation but through discovery, the quiet, devastating kind. Late one night, the contents of Urban's phone allegedly revealed a series of messages with a female vocalist from his touring band. The exchanges were not ambiguous. They pointed to arranged private meetings during times he had claimed to be working. The deception had been deliberate and calculated. The confrontation that followed was not a screaming match. It was a methodical, hours-long presentation of evidence accumulated over months, specific messages, inconsistencies in travel accounts, financial details that suddenly made a troubling kind of sense. By the time it was over, Kidman had issued what those close to her described as a final, non-negotiable ultimatum: complete transparency going forward, a meaningfully reduced touring schedule, and an immediate commitment to couples therapy. One final chance. He accepted the terms. He made every promise. For a brief period, it appeared those promises might hold. The couple were even reported to have reaffirmed their commitment in an intimate ceremony. But by the following summer, the patterns had reportedly returned. The promises were broken. And that, more than the original betrayal, was the thing that could not be undone. Silence as evidence. The legal dissolution of the marriage was striking precisely because of how quietly and efficiently it unfolded. No dueling press statements. No social media warfare. Court documents cited the standard phrase, irreconcilable differences, but the terms of the settlement communicated something far more specific. Urban agreed to a custody arrangement that gave him access to his daughters for approximately 59 days per year. Fathers who believe themselves to be in a morally equal position contest arrangements like that. His quiet acceptance suggested he understood the alternative, a contested legal process in which private communications and arranged meetings could become a matter of public record. Child support obligations were settled in a single lump sum payment, a move that severed ongoing financial entanglement with clean finality. Every structural detail of the settlement pointed toward a process in which one party held the moral leverage and the other accepted the terms to avoid further exposure. Why he spoke. Russell Crowe has built a career and a reputation on a code of loyalty that includes, prominently, not discussing the private lives of friends. His decision to allow his perspective to surface was not made lightly, and it was not made out of a desire to generate headlines. As news of the divorce became public, a particular narrative began to take shape, one that framed Urban as the broken-hearted devoted husband sidelined by a demanding career, and Kidman as the emotionally remote wife who had simply walked away. Crowe had watched his friend give nearly 2 decades of loyalty, forgiveness, and sacrifice to a marriage she believed in. He was not willing to watch a false story calcify into accepted truth. His choice to speak was an act of correction on behalf of someone who, bound by legal discretion and personal dignity, could not fully correct the record herself. Nicole Kidman did not walk away from her marriage. She held on long past the point where others might have let go, and when she finally made the decision to leave, it was not out of coldness or indifference but out of the quiet, unshakable resolve of a woman whose trust had been broken once too many times. What remains? In the aftermath, the contrast between the two principles has been quietly telling. Urban withdrew from public view, described by those around him as struggling with the weight of both guilt and perception. Kidman, by contrast, continued to show up, for her work, for her daughters, for the commitment she had made. No dramatic displays of grief. No public recriminations. Just a steady, forward momentum that those who know her recognize as the truest expression of her character. Her story, as Crowe's loyalty helped illuminate it, is not ultimately about betrayal. It is about what a person is willing to give, and the particular kind of quiet strength it takes to walk away when giving more would only diminish you. The marriage ended. The woman did not.